They came from the sky without a sound. No warning, no sirens, just shadows falling over Bobo-Dioulasso, parachutes opening like silent thunder. Hundreds of soldiers rained down not to perform, not for parade, but to prepare. But prepare for what? Why deploy over 500 elite troops over a quiet Burkina Faso city best known for music and mangoes? This wasn't theater, it was a message, a declaration. Burkina Faso is changing how wars are fought and who fights them. Beneath the familiar surface of Bobo lies Sesquietap, a military nerve center where gravity is defied and survival is rewritten. It doesn't look like much from outside. Fences, dust, silence. But inside, it's a crucible. Here, men are forged not just to fight, but to fall from the sky, hit the earth with speed, and operate in chaos. Parachuting here isn't glory, it's pain, it's bruises, it's crawling through red soil with 30 kilograms strapped to your back while the sun watches you break. This doctrine isn't borrowed, it's born. Born from a country that has seen promises fail and interventions falter. SkyTap is not an accessory, it's the centerpiece. And the soldiers it produces are not ordinary. They are taught to understand turbulence midair, to communicate in wind, to drop into darkness and act before their boots even settle. Why? Because Burkina Faso doesn't fight on roads anymore. The roads are mined. The villages are burned. The enemies don't announce themselves. They don't wear uniforms. They wait for night. And so, Burkina's answer must fly. Why Bobo? Because its geography makes it a launch pad, close enough to conflict, far enough from chaos. And steeped in a legacy of forgotten military architecture, it now beats with a new rhythm. African, indigenous, uncolonized. The 2025 jump campaign wasn't a spectacle. It was a stress test. More than 500 soldiers thrown from planes to prove not courage, but capability. Real missions, real terrain. No blanks, no rehearsals. Just speed, silence, and steel resolve. These troops train for more than descent. They train for aftermath, to reach coordinates under fire, to seize territory unseen, to neutralize threats in the breath between confusion and clarity. This isn't theory, it's the new face of African conflict. And Burkina is meeting it on its own terms, with dust on its boots and no Western advisors in sight. They're not waiting, they're not asking. And if you think this is just military maneuvering, think again. This is Burkina Faso rewriting what it means to defend a state, with no applause, no headlines, and no backup. These paratroopers are shadows forged in sun, designed to land where hope has long vanished. They are the storm that touches ground before silence does. And their message is clear. This time we're coming before the fire spreads. Do you believe this is the future of African defense? Share your thoughts below and tell us what this means for regional sovereignty. But who are they fighting? That question lingers like the dust their boots stir up. Burkina Faso is not in a conventional war. It's fighting ghosts, faceless insurgents, shifting allegiances, enemies without flags. This is a phantom war, where attackers strike and vanish, where schools burn in the night and villages wake to silence and ruin. These are not battles won with tanks. These are wars of presence, of timing, of getting there before it's too late. And that's why paratroopers matter. Not because they fall, but because they land fast. Faster than rumors, faster than fear. When a village is attacked at 2:00 a.m., there's no time for convoys to be assembled. But a sky force? It launches in minutes. It lands in cornfields, rooftops, riverbanks. It stabilizes before the enemy disappears. Burkina is no longer waiting for the world to care. It's building the answer in real time. These airborne soldiers aren't just fighters. They are autonomous systems, each one trained to survive for 72 hours behind enemy lines. With satellite kits, with encrypted comms, with food, ammunition, and grit to operate without command. They're not looking for orders. They are the orders. Their mission isn't to follow, it's to disrupt, destabilize, restore, and above all, reclaim. Burkina Faso's paratroopers are rewriting the rules. They've stopped thinking like underdogs. They're acting like guardians. In every training jump, they don't just learn to land, they learn to transform chaos into coordination. That's why they're taught to act as medics, engineers, scouts, and analysts all at once. One soldier becomes a unit, one landing becomes a front, and each drop zone becomes a temporary republic, governed not by bureaucracy, but by resolve. And that's the terrifying power of this new doctrine. The enemy is losing its favorite weapon, time. These insurgent networks used to rely on delay. They would strike and disappear before any response. But now responses are falling from the sky before the fires have cooled. That advantage is gone. And so is their myth of invincibility. This is no borrowed solution. It's not French counterinsurgency, not American shock and awe. It's Sahel logic. It's local terrain, local minds, local needs. It's a doctrine born in sweat and silence, built not with dollars, but with determination. These soldiers are not strangers to the soil they land on. Some grew up in those very regions. Some still have family in nearby towns. That gives them more than a tactical edge. It gives them a moral one. They are not invading, they are returning. And when they land, villagers don't just see a uniform. They see an answer to the question they've been asking for years. Will anyone ever protect us? This moment is not just strategy, it is memory. It is return. If this touched you, drop a comment below and tell us what it means for a soldier to come home armed, not just with weapons, but with purpose. But what happens when they land and there is no one waiting to support them? That's the brutal genius of Burkina Faso's new warfare. Paratroopers don't wait for backup. They are the backup. Once their boots hit the earth, they become medics, commanders, communication hubs, even engineers. Alone but never unprepared. They carry with them not only weapons, but the infrastructure of resistance. Radios that cut through jungle silence, maps etched into memory, and the willingness to die if it means a village lives. These units are not symbolic, they are surgical. Each landing triggers a sequence: secure the perimeter, assess threats, engage if needed, and restore basic order. But the enemies they face are invisible, sometimes indistinguishable from farmers, sometimes hiding in the terrain itself. That's why the first rule they're taught is not to shoot, but to see, to detect, to think faster than an ambush. The second rule: control communication. Every team is wired with compact satellite systems. They don't wait for central command, they become command. They sync with local defense groups, they coordinate with civilians, and they transmit real-time intelligence, turning a drop site into a nerve center. What once took hours of bureaucratic planning now takes minutes on encrypted radios. Then comes stabilization. This doesn't just mean neutralizing targets. It means saving the wounded, escorting children from burning classrooms, pulling teachers from hiding, disarming traps. Sometimes it means retrieving documents from insurgent caches. Other times it's holding the ground for 48 hours with no sleep and no food, while help is still miles away. And when help doesn't come, because sometimes it doesn't, they hold anyway. This is not Hollywood warfare. There are no cavalry charges, no helicopters roaring in. These men are trained to be forgotten, to be left behind, and to still win. Because for them, survival isn't just about living, it's about protecting something sacred. Dignity. They're taught that their presence is the final line. If they fall, villages fall. If they break, the myth breaks. That pressure is not a burden. It's a bond. It forges soldiers who aren't just fighters, but symbols of return, of defiance, of a country refusing to collapse. And that symbolism isn't theoretical, it's deeply personal. Many of these soldiers are stepping into the very towns where they once played as children. Now they carry rifles where they once carried water buckets. Now they answer questions they once asked. Where is our protection? The transformation is total. These are not foreign soldiers flown in to stabilize a map. These are sons of the soil who refuse to watch their homeland burn. If you've ever felt abandoned by those meant to protect you, tell us below. What would it mean to see your own people come back to stand guard over your future? This is why SKITAP doesn't just train the body, it trains the soul. Soldiers are thrown into night drills where the sky offers no stars and the ground offers no mercy. They practice zero visibility landings, simulate equipment failure, endure isolation missions where their only companion is silence and the fear of not being found. They're taught to turn wooden fences into barricades, farm tools into weapons, elders into allies. Because in this war, the enemy may not be a man. It may be the silence between allies, the doubt in a child's eyes, the hesitation in a soldier's own mind. This isn't a war of bullets, it's a war of belief. The goal is not simply to kill insurgents, it's to reclaim mental ground, to rebuild the trust that was burned with every abandoned village and every broken promise. These paratroopers become instruments of memory. Their presence whispers, "We didn't forget you." And slowly, the terrain is responding. Villagers who once fled into forests are returning to their homes. Communities that once called insurgents their only protectors are learning to hope again. This is how the front lines shift, not just with force, but with faith. But that makes the mission even heavier, because these soldiers know, if they fall, hope falls with them. That's why failure is not an option. That's why the 2025 campaign was designed not for comfort, but for confrontation. With the enemy, yes, but more urgently, with fear, with exhaustion, with the very idea of giving up. Each jump is a test, each landing is a vow, and each soldier is not just a fighter, but a strategy, a symbol, a living message that says, we don't need to wait for anyone to save us anymore. This message is not just reaching villages, it's echoing across borders. Because what began in Bobo-Dioulasso is no longer staying in Bobo-Dioulasso. The ripples are growing, and so is the mission. If you've ever believed Africa should define its own defense on its own terms, type sovereign in the comments. Let your voice be part of this awakening, because now the strategy is expanding. What started as a national doctrine is becoming a regional prototype. The skies over Burkina Faso were only the beginning. The next frontier? A Pan-Sahel response force, born not in foreign embassies, but in African dust, on African time, with African will. In 2023, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, promising mutual defense. But promises without power are paper. SkyTap is turning that paper into steel. Imagine it. A unified airborne unit not bound by borders, not restrained by red tape. Soldiers trained in Bobo-Dioulasso, deploying into eastern Niger to intercept extremist convoys. Malian paratroopers dropping into Burkina corridors under siege. No delays, no third-party permissions, just action, just defense, just sovereignty. This is not speculation. High-ranking whispers suggest joint drills are already being mapped out. Not by foreign consultants, but by African tacticians. Without NATO, without France, without the UN. Just Sahel strategy, raw, real, and ruthless. And this terrifies more than just insurgents. Because if Africa builds its own strike force, who loses influence? If paratroopers can cross borders faster than peacekeepers can draft reports, who controls the narrative? The answer is shifting. The power is localizing. For decades, West African military thinking was derivative, copied, conditional, outsourced. SkyTap burns that model to the ground. No more waiting for Western airstrikes, no more dependency on aid with strings. Burkina Faso is proving that with vision, discipline, and ground truth, a sovereign force can rise from within. And it's not just about tactics, it's about psychology. Insurgents have thrived on myths that African armies are slow, scattered, unreliable. But when word spreads that AES paratroopers can land anywhere, anytime, that myth dies. So does insurgent morale. So does fear. Civilians begin to believe again. They start to trust, not in foreign saviors, but in local strength, in African answers, in soldiers who speak their language, who know their names, who defend without agenda. This is what makes SkyTap more than a base. It's a blueprint, and it's starting to spread. What do you think? Should Africa continue to wait for foreign help or lead its own future? Drop your thoughts below. We read every comment. And let's be clear, this transformation isn't just military, it's existential. Because every successful jump, every coordinated strike, Every village defended by local sons chips away at something deeper than insurgency. It erodes the centuries-old narrative that Africa must be saved from outside. That safety is a foreign product. That defense must come in blue helmets or under foreign flags. Burkina Faso is rejecting that lie with every parachute. It's saying, we see the danger. We will respond, not as victims, not as dependents, but as architects of our own survival. And that message is rippling not just across towns, but across mindsets. This isn't just a new military program, it's a cultural reset, one where sovereignty is not a speech, it's a landing zone, one where identity isn't celebrated through festivals, but defended with precision, purpose, and parachutes. It's no longer just about the paratroopers themselves, it's about what they represent. To insurgents, they are a nightmare, fast, local, and unpredictable. To civilians, they are a promise that the state still breathes, that protection is personal, and that neglect is no longer policy. Every soldier in Seskai Tap is trained to think beyond battle. They're taught diplomacy through action. In the aftermath of a raid, some are tasked with rebuilding, not just structures, but trust. They work with elders. They sleep beside volunteers. They eat what locals eat, not as guests, but as guardians. And this is perhaps the most radical part of all. The lines between soldier and citizen are beginning to blur. These men are not occupiers. They are not alien forces. They are born of the very soil they defend. And that changes everything. It makes war personal. It makes peace urgent. It makes silence impossible. Because once a child sees a paratrooper land in his village and stop the bullets before they come, he will never forget. He will grow up not fearing uniforms, but aspiring to wear one. Not doubting his country, but daring to defend it. That is generational change. That is how a doctrine becomes destiny. Is this the kind of future Africa deserves? If this vision speaks to you, write "Rise" in the comments and let's make our voices louder than fear. But with every new jump, with every mission deep into the unknown, another question rises quietly beneath the surface. What happens if it all fails? What if one day a paratrooper lands and there's no signal, no support, no way out? That's the terrifying edge Burkina Faso walks with this doctrine. It's built not on certainty, but on commitment. A commitment that says, even if no one comes, we will not retreat. And that's exactly what makes it so powerful, because these soldiers are not playing defense. They're rewriting offense. Their existence challenges an entire structure that once relied on waiting, on requesting, on begging for help. Now they operate under a brutal but liberating assumption. If they don't act, no one will. And in that brutal truth, they've discovered something remarkable: resilience. They're trained to run missions on instinct, to survive on grit, to stabilize without strategy memos. These men are built not for approval, but for outcomes. They don't wait for permission. They land, assess, execute, and then vanish again, like a heartbeat that only reveals itself when survival depends on it. But this approach isn't just about winning a war. It's about redefining what war even means. In Burkina Faso's new reality, war is not about destruction. It's about reclamation, reclaiming space, time, trust, and memory. The battlefield isn't just land, it's legacy. The fight isn't just for safety, it's for self-definition. And that's why behind every drop zone, there's something far bigger than strategy unfolding. There's a spiritual reclaiming of sovereignty. There's a collective whisper that says, no more waiting, no more asking, we are enough. That is a dangerous idea for those who benefit from African dependence, and a hopeful one for those who believe in African agency. Every time these soldiers land, they're not just countering insurgents. They're countering decades of military conditioning that taught African states to defer, delay, depend. This is defiance, in formation, in motion, in silence. What do you think? Can a single soldier shift an entire mindset? Can a parachute carry a nation's pride? Share your thoughts. Your voice adds weight to this mission, because this mission isn't stopping. If anything, it's accelerating. Seskai Tap is no longer just a base, it's becoming a school for the future. not just of Burkina Faso, but of a borderless African defense vision. One where soldiers trained under one flag respond to threats across many, where allegiance is not to geography, but to collective dignity. And this vision is taking shape. Quietly, drills are being planned with Mali and Niger, not for show, not for Western funding, but for readiness. African terrain, African threats, African solutions. It's a doctrine of dust and discipline, not politics and protocols. It's what happens when sovereign nations realize they don't need anyone's permission to protect what's theirs. But that realization comes with risks. There will be pressure from foreign actors who benefit from fragmentation, from institutions that prefer dependency, from voices that whisper, "You're not ready, you need us." But Burkina Faso has stopped listening, not out of pride, but out of necessity, because too much time has been lost, too many lives disrupted, too many futures gambled on promises that never landed. And so now the nation looks up, not to foreign flags, but to its own skies, watching its sons descend not in fear, but in fire, not in panic, but in precision. The 25 Parachute campaign will be remembered not just for its tactical execution, but for its symbolic awakening. A people standing upright, a doctrine forged not in Paris or Washington, but in the red earth of Bobo-Dioulasso. And as this force grows, so does its message. Sovereignty is not a slogan, it is a system. It's not declared, it's delivered. From the Squipati in silence, in full gear, with no backup but belief, because the truth is no one is coming. And for the first time, that truth doesn't sound like despair. It sounds like determination. It sounds like freedom. It sounds like Burkina Faso. Let us know below. Do you believe this model could be the blueprint for a truly sovereign African future? If so, comment blueprint and share this story with someone who still believes in borrowed power. They need to hear this. And now the world watches, some in silence, others in discomfort, as a nation once dismissed as fragile builds something terrifyingly competent. Burkina Faso is not just arming soldiers, it is weaponizing belief, turning memory into momentum, turning history into heat. These paratroopers are not here to inspire, they are here to endure. And endurance is the most radical act in a region that has been taught to expect abandonment. For decades, West Africa has been fractured not just by borders, but by broken trust. Plans made in distant capitals, interventions laced with conditions, peace offered as a contract, not a right. SKITAP has no interest in those old deals. It's not trying to win anyone's approval. It's trying to win time, precious, bloody minutes that mean the difference between a village being saved and erased. That's why this campaign matters, because it proves that readiness is not about size, but about will. That modern defense isn't about hardware, but about heart. That when a nation stops asking, who will help us, and starts asking, who among us will rise, something shifts. A psychology of resilience replaces dependency, and with it, an architecture of action begins to form. The 2025 Parachute Doctrine is no longer theoretical. It's operational. It has landed, it has moved, it has fought, it has held. And most of all, it has reminded every outsider watching that Africa doesn't lack courage. It lacks the permission to act alone. That permission has now been taken. And let's be honest, that frightens many. Because a sovereign Africa armed with speed, unity, and local command threatens more than insurgents. It threatens the industry of dependence, the comfort of foreign control, the illusion that African power must always be guided. But that illusion is dying in the dust of Bobo-Dioulasso, and in its place rises a new image. Soldiers descending in silence, moving with coordination, acting with urgency, answering to no one but their own. This isn't the future, it's the present. It's already happening. So what do we do with that truth? We amplify it, we honor it, we protect it. Because stories like this aren't just military briefings, they're historical turning points. They mark the shift from being watched to watching, from being told to telling, from asking to acting. Burkina Faso's airborne doctrine may have started as a national need, but it's ending as a continental challenge. a dare to the rest of Africa. If they can build this, what are we waiting for? And to those who still doubt, who still believe sovereignty must be supervised, look up. Look at the sky over the Sahel. And when you see parachutes, understand, that's not war. That's not spectacle. That is freedom landing before you even know you needed it. This is the silent revolution. No slogans, no marching bands, just resolve. Just brothers with boots and belief, falling from the heavens to reclaim what was always theirs. They don't want thanks. They want results. They don't ask for applause. They ask, who's next? And so we end not with a conclusion, but with a question. What would happen if every African nation believed this deeply in itself? If every village saw its defenders return before the fear arrived? That's the question we leave with you. If this story made you think, feel, or hope, don't scroll away in silence. Comment your thoughts. Share this story. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be heard before the next parachute lands.